Most people are working against their neurobiology when they try to change their lives. Here's what I've learned studying the brain for over a decade. Motivation is literally designed to be fleeting. Every January, millions of people set goals. And by February, 8% have abandoned them. The self-help industry will tell you that this is a discipline problem. Neuroscience says that this is a brain architecture problem. I'm going to share 7 neuroscience-backed principles for rewiring your brain in 2026. They're not hacks, they're based on how your brain actually changes at the structural level. Your brain doesn't change based on what you want. It changes based on who you believe you are. There's a window of about 48 hours where your brain is primed to encode that change. Your willpower is finite. Most people set the activation threshold way too high. For me, every habit I've built around brain health is connected to watching my grandmother lose herself to dementia. Your brain doesn't change while you're working. It changes while you're resting. The last principle, and I told you that I saved the most counterintuitive one for the end. Here it is. I'm Louisa Nicola, and this is the Neuro Experience. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Neuro Experience podcast. I'm Louisa Nicola. I'm a clinical neurophysiologist and Alzheimer's disease researcher, and welcome to 2026. Today, we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to talk to you about how to actually use your brain, like properly use it, to achieve more in 2026 than you did in the last 5 years combined. I don't say that lightly because here's what I've learned studying the brain for over a decade. Most people are working against their neurobiology when they try to change their lives. They're setting goals the wrong way. They're relying on motivation when motivation is literally designed to be fleeting. They're ignoring the single most powerful change agent that they have access to. That thing is not discipline. It's not willpower. It's not waking up at 5 a.m. It's not journaling. It's understanding how your brain actually learns, adapts, and transforms. So today, I'm going to give you a neuroscience-backed framework for making 2026 the year things actually shift for you, not temporarily, but permanently, at the level of your neural architecture. And I've saved the most counterintuitive one for the end, the one that changed everything for me personally. So make sure you stick around for that. Okay, let's start with why most people fail at personal development. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this because every January, millions of people set goals. I'm going to lose more weight. I'm going to get a promotion. I'm going to try and be more present. I'm going to read 52 books this year. And by February, 8% have abandoned them. By March, most people can't even remember the goals that they had even written down in January. The self-help industry will tell you that this is a discipline problem or a motivation problem. You just don't want it badly enough problem. And that's not what neuroscience says. Neuroscience says that this is a brain architecture problem. You're asking your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, future thinking, to override millions of years of evolutionary programming designed to keep you safe, comfortable, and conserving energy. So here's the thing about your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex, it sits right here, okay, in the frontal lobe. It's a resource hog. It uses more glucose than almost any other part of your brain. It fatigues quickly, and when it's tired, when you're stressed, when you're hungry, when you've made too many decisions that day, it goes offline and shuts down. Guess what takes over when your prefrontal cortex checks out? Your limbic system, your basal ganglia, the parts of your brain that run on habit, emotion, and pattern recognition. So you can have the best intentions in the world at 7 a.m. when your prefrontal cortex is fresh. But by 7 p.m., you're not making decisions anymore. You're running on programs. And if you haven't deliberately installed better programs, you're just going to default to the old ones. So this is why motivation doesn't work. Motivation is a prefrontal cortex phenomenon, and your prefrontal cortex is not available to you for most of the waking hours. So what does work? Well, working with your brain instead of against it. And here's what the rest of the episode is about. I'm going to share 7 neuroscience-backed principles for rewiring your brain in 2026. They're not hacks. I hate the word hacks. They're based on how your brain actually changes at the structural level. And it's a process called neuroplasticity. So a quick definition for people, I know you've probably heard of neuroplasticity, but basically it's your brain's ability to recognize itself by forming new neural connections throughout your life. Your brain isn't fixed. It's not set in stone after childhood. It can actually change its structure based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. But, and this is a huge but, neuroplasticity is use dependent. So it doesn't happen just because you want it to. It happens because you create the right conditions for it. That's what these 7 principles are about, creating these conditions for your brain to change. Let's get into it. One thing I talk a lot about with athletes and executives is that longevity isn't just about what you add. It's about what your body can clear. Oxidative stress, inflammation, environmental toxins, those things quietly tax the brain over time. And that's why I use Rho Nutrition. Specifically, I use their liposomal glutathione. If you haven't heard, glutathione is your body's master antioxidant. It's what your cells use to neutralize free radicals. And this is what supports detox pathways. And really, it helps to protect your mitochondrial health. And this one specifically directly impacts cognition, energy, and how you age. The liposomal product that I use from Rho actually gets absorbed. So you feel like it's working instead of just taking a glutathione supplement. This is one of the few supplements I take that supports resilience at the cellular level. If you want to try this, you can get 20% off with code NEURO at rhonutrition.com/neuro. That is code NEURO for 20% off at rhonutrition.com. Principle number 1, your brain doesn't change based on what you want. It changes based on who you believe you are. That's insane, right? Let me explain why this matters neurologically. Your brain has something called a reticular activating system, the RAS. It's basically a filter that decides what information gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets ignored. You're bombarded with millions of bits of sensory information every second, and your RAS filters it to what is relevant to you. Your RAS filters based on your identity. So what you believe about yourself, what you think is true about who you are. So if you set a goal to run a marathon this year, but your deep identity belief is, I'm not a runner, or I'm not athletic, your reticular activating system will literally filter out opportunities, information, and motivation that would support that goal. That's not you being lazy. It's your brain doing exactly what it's designed to do, keeping your reality consistent with your beliefs. This is why identity-based change is so much more powerful than goal-based change. So instead of, I want to lose 20 pounds this year, you can change it to, I'm someone who prioritizes her health. Instead of, I want to read more books, you can change it to, I'm a learner. I'm someone who consistently educates herself. Instead of, I want to be less stressed, you can change it to, I'm someone who protects my nervous system. When you shift at the identity level, your reticular activating system starts working for you, not against you. You start noticing opportunities that you would have missed, and you start feeling pulled towards behavior that align with your identity instead of having to push yourself. So the practical application here is I want you to write down 3 identity statements for 2026, not goals, identities. Who are you becoming? Write them in present tense. I am someone who, and then read them every morning. And by the way, guys, I do this every single day. I actually have on my desk where I sit, you can call them your motivational quotes or your affirmations, whatever you want, but I write them down. I am, boom, I am this. Sometimes I even write you are, like it's somebody else speaking to me, because it's not woo-woo manifestation, which is what I used to believe in my 20s. But because you're training your reticular activating system to filter out reality differently, this is why it works. Let's move on to the second principle. I think this is going to be the one that actually changes how you think about action. So there's a window of neuroplasticity that most people don't know about. When you learn something new, when you have an insight, when you get inspired, when you decide you want to change, there's a window of about 48 hours where your brain is primed to encode that change. After that 48 hours, the neural pathway starts to weaken if it's not reinforced. So the insight starts to fade. The motivation disappears and you go back to baseline. This is why you can read an incredible book or an incredible journal article, feel transformed, and then 2 weeks later, you can't even remember what it was about. You didn't do anything with it in that 48-hour window. So the neuroscience here involves something called long-term potentiation, or LTP. It's the process by which synaptic connections strengthen through repeated activation. The phrase that neuroscientists use is neurons that fire together, wire together, but here's what people miss. They have to fire repeatedly and soon for that wiring to become permanent. So here's the rule. When you learn something that feels important, when you have an insight, when you feel that spark of this could change things, you have 48 hours to act on it, not to think about it, to act on it. That might mean teaching it to someone else, which is one of the most powerful ways to encode learning, or writing it down, or taking one small action aligned with it, or creating a reminder system so you can revisit it. If you listen to this episode and think, wow, that's great, and then you do nothing with it for the next 48 hours, your brain will not change at all. You'll remember that you listened to something about neuroscience, but the insights won't be encoded. So I want you to pause this video right now, or wherever you're listening to this, and put a reminder in your phone 48 hours from now. What did I do with what I learned from Louisa's episode? Because that check-in will force you to take action while the window is still open. This one habit, acting within 48 hours of insight, has been one of the most powerful shifts in my own learning and growth. It's how I'm able to do the podcast. It's how I'm able to teach. It's how I'm able to host workshops. It's just completely changed how I consume information. One of the most fascinating things that I have come across over the last 12 months is the use of exogenous ketones. Your brain uses ketones more effectively than what it does glucose. Now, the glucose is the primary fuel source of the brain, but it doesn't use it as well as what it uses with ketones. Now, it's so hard to get into a ketogenic state. So I take exogenous ketones. I use Ketone IQ, and this is because it delivers the most efficient fuel to my brain. And this is the best thing I can do when I'm traveling long hours and when I'm working so many hours during the day. I use it for recording days, travel days, whenever I want my brain to stay sharp for long periods of time. If you've been wanting to try exogenous ketones, you don't know which one, try Ketone IQ. Just go to ketone.com/neuro to get 30% off your subscription. And if you do sign up using this code, you'll get a free gift with your second shipment. That is ketone.com/neuro for 30% off. Okay. The third principle, your willpower is finite. It's a finite resource, and every decision you make depletes it. I mentioned earlier that your prefrontal cortex fatigues. This isn't metaphorical, it's measurable. Studies have shown that the more decisions you make in a day, the worse your subsequent decisions become. This is called decision fatigue, and it's why you can be perfectly disciplined all day and then completely fall apart at night. Think about it. By the time you get to the evening, you've made hundreds of decisions. What to wear, what to eat, how to respond to that email, what to prioritize, whether to take that call. Each one of these decisions uses fuel from your prefrontal cortex. So by the evening, your brain is essentially running on empty. And that's when the old patterns take over. That's when you scroll instead of reading. That's when you order takeaway instead of cooking. That's when you skip the workout, or you send an email or a text message to someone that you don't want, which I've done several times and always coincides with 9 p.m. at night. It's just brain physiology. So how do we work with this? I mean, we have to make decisions, right? Well, you can reduce the number of decisions that you have to make. You systematize, you automate, you make the important decisions when your brain is fresh, not when it's depleted. Practically, this looks like planning your meals in advance. Basically, I just want you guys to know that every Sunday I sit down and I write out my entire week. I do meal prepping on Sundays, but the most important thing of my Sundays is I write down, what do I have to do tomorrow? I write down a list, because when I wake up in the morning, I look at that list. It's so much easier for me instead of just thinking of what I have to do, right? So time blocking your calendar so you're not deciding what should I do now every hour. Another thing I do is I pretty much just wear black and white, right? Because it takes away from like thinking about what I have to wear. I just literally have my jeans, a white shirt. I'm always wearing like something black. And this is because I don't want decision fatigue about what I'm wearing. I'm not in fashion, so I don't need to always look the best, right? So make that your goal. The goal is to make your desired behaviors the default, the path of least resistance, so that when your prefrontal cortex goes offline, and it will, you're not relying on willpower. You're relying on systems. Okay, let's get into the fourth principle. This one's about momentum. Your brain has an activation threshold. In order to start any behavior, there's a certain amount of activation energy required to overcome inertia. And here's what most people get wrong. They set the activation threshold way too high. Like, for example, I'm going to go to the gym for an hour, and then I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to write 2,000 words. I mean, who are you kidding? When the activation threshold is high, the resistance is high. Your brain calculates the effort required and often decides if it's worth it or not. So you don't end up starting at all. And here's what neuroscience shows us. Starting is everything, because once you start, something called behavioral momentum kicks in. That's the same neural networks that were resisting the action that was supporting you starting in the first place. So you're already doing the thing. The activation energy has been paid. Continuing is much easier than starting. So the principle is make your activation threshold as low as possible. I call this the minimum viable action. Don't commit to an hour at the gym. Commit to putting on your gym shoes. That's it. When I was a triathlete, we used to call these set points. So instead of thinking, my coach used to say to me, Louisa, we'd have our program, right? It would be daunting for me. Every Sunday, that was our long, slow distance ride. One day I woke up and it was a 250-kilometer ride. And I'm like, oh my God, that's insane. But we broke it up, right? We would ride maybe 20, 30 kilometers, have a break, do it again. And that was usually my Sundays, right? We were just clocking up those kilometers on the bike. And I knew that was daunting for me. So he actually put it down in set points. And he would say, we're going to ride 20 kilometers. And then that's all you have to do. And that was so much easier for me, 20 kilometers, than seeing 200, because they were just set points to getting to the 200, right? That's it. The minimum viable action is like putting on your shoes and going to the gym. After that, you'll probably go. But even if you don't, you've done what you committed to. Don't commit to meditating for 30 minutes. Commit to sitting down and taking 3 breaths. That's the minimum viable action. Don't commit to 2,000 words. Commit to opening the document and writing 1 sentence. What you're doing is hacking your brain's resistance system. You're making the barrier to entry low that your brain can't justify not doing it. And then you let momentum take over. That is how I built my exercise habit. I didn't start with intense training. I started with, I'll put my workout clothes on every morning. That's it. There was a point where my cupboard was just full of supplements that I didn't really trust, and I didn't want to think anymore. So I wanted a simple way that actually covered the basics without complicating nutrition. So I started taking Kachava, and I found this out from a friend. It's an all-in-one nutrition shake made with high-quality plant protein, which I love, fiber, greens, adaptogens, and essential vitamins and minerals. There's no artificial flavors, no nonsense. So basically, it's a drink. I keep it in my fridge. I open it up, and this is what I have in the mornings. Because let me tell you, the mornings for me are so rushed. I know I need at least 20 to 30 grams of protein in the morning. If I don't have that in the morning, I'm screwed for the rest of the day. Kachava is actually helping me do this because it's just an all-in-one drink. I think for me, the best thing about this is the ease and comfort of knowing I'm getting absolutely everything in a bottle in the morning. If you want to try this, new customers get $20 off an order of 2 bags or more now through to the 31st. That's kachava.com, code NEURO to get $20 off. Okay, so let's get into the 5th principle. And this is one that the personal development world often gets wrong. Your brain doesn't encode information based on importance. It encodes it based on emotion. This is why you can forget what you learned in a lecture yesterday, but remember in vivid detail an embarrassing thing that happened to you in high school. The embarrassment, the emotional charge told your brain, this matters. Remember this. It's like when you can remember like a really, really bad breakup, for example. The part of your brain responsible for emotional processing, the amygdala, is directly connected to your hippocampus, which handles memory formation. So when emotion is present, memory encoding is dramatically enhanced. We're talking up to 10 times more likely to be remembered. So what does this mean for your personal development in 2026? It means that if you want to change, I'm talking really change, you can't just learn intellectually. You have to feel it. This is why reading about the benefits of exercise doesn't make you exercise. The information's there, but there's no emotional charge. If you have a health scare or if someone you love gets sick, suddenly there's emotion and suddenly change happens. Now, I'm not saying wait for a crisis to change. I'm saying you need to intentionally bring emotion into your growth. And here's how you do it. Connect your goals to something that genuinely moves you, not what you think you should want. What actually creates emotion? What is creating an emotional response? For me, every habit I've built around brain health is connected to watching my grandmother lose herself to dementia. That emotional memory is wired into everything I do. I don't need motivation. I have something much more powerful. The second thing I do is I visualize. Visualize not just the outcome, but how it makes you feel. This is you activating your limbic system, creating emotional change around the future that you're creating. Where are you? How does it feel? What is the smell? And the third is you want to celebrate your wins, right? Whether it's small, whether it's big. It sounds simple, but most people skip right past their wins and they get onto the next part of their list. But when you pause and feel the positive emotion, like about something that you just won, it's telling yourself this is worth repeating in your brain's reward system. So emotion is not the opposite of rational goal pursuit. It's the fuel that makes it stick. Principle number 6. Stop trying to use willpower to overcome a badly designed environment. Your brain is constantly scanning your environment for cues. These cues trigger behaviors automatically without conscious thought. This is how habits work, right? Cue, routine, reward. So if your environment is full of cues for the behaviors you're trying to stop, you're fighting an uphill battle. You might win for a while, but eventually your willpower will deplete and the environmental cue will take over and win. Here's an example. If you're trying to eat healthier, but your kitchen counter has biscuits on it, you have to use willpower every single time you walk past it. Each time you're spending prefrontal cortex resources. Eventually, those resources run out and you eat the biscuit. But if you redesign the environment, if you get rid of the chocolate, get rid of the biscuits, and they're not there, instead of there's a bowl of fruit, now the healthy choice is the easy choice. So you're not relying on willpower, you're relying on design. For me, one of my goals is to scroll less, right? So in order to do that, I have to make my phone less accessible. But in order to do that, I have bought this little device. My friend bought it. If you tap it, it locks you out of certain apps. I've set it to lock me out of Instagram. And then it only lets me go back into Instagram when I double tap it again. It's quite scary, especially if I lose that device. But that's the only way that I'm helping willpower in this instance. One of the fastest ways to feel better is by staying hydrated. Your brain depends on proper hydration for focus, reaction time, and mood. And this is why I'm always carrying a Cure hydration pack in my bag. It's a plant-based electrolyte mix with no added sugar, built on oral hydration science. And this is the same approach used clinically because it actually improves absorption. I mean, I see so many of you drinking water, but I don't see many people drinking electrolytes. And that's probably because they think, well, I don't need to have electrolytes if I'm not sweating. That is not true. I assure you, once you start adding in electrolytes, especially these ones at Cure Hydration, you will feel so much better. Even the clarity of your thoughts will be better. It makes staying hydrated effortless. Try this out because for all of my Neuro Experience listeners, you will get 20% off your first order at curehydration.com/neuro. Okay, the last principle. And I told you that I saved the most counterintuitive one for the end. Here it is. Your brain doesn't change while you're working. It changes while you're resting. Let me explain the neuroscience. When you're learning something new, practicing a new skill, or changing a behavior, you're activating certain neural pathways. But the actual consolidation of that learning, the strengthening of those synaptic connections happens during sleep, particularly deep, slow wave sleep. Your brain replays the day's experiences. It strengthens the connections that were activated and prunes the ones that weren't. This is when learning becomes permanent. This is when neuroplasticity actually happens. So if you're grinding constantly, never resting, sleeping poorly, always in output mode, you're actually preventing the change you're working so hard to create. This was a huge mindset shift for me. I used to think rest was what you did when you couldn't work anymore. Now I understand that resting is the work. It's when the magic happens. This is why sleep is non-negotiable. So if you're trying to change, it's not a luxury. It's literally when your brain rewires itself. But it's not just sleep. It's also those moments of just doing nothing, of letting your mind wander, of not being productive. Your brain has something called the default mode network. It's active when you're not focused on any particular task. And research shows that this network is essential for insight, creativity, and integrating new information with existing knowledge. So if you're always focused, always consuming, always on, you never activate this network. And then you miss out on the deeper processing that leads to real insight and change. So my challenge for you is build rest into your growth plan. For me, this looks like actually prioritizing all my tasks so I can start to switch off at 8 p.m. at night. So I can essentially, I need like 2 hours of like mindlessness in order to fall asleep and stay asleep. And for me, that means getting everything done before 8 p.m. The neuroscience here is clear, guys. Effortlessness is not the same as unproductive. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is rest. Okay, I'm going to recap the 7 principles. 1, identity before goals. Change who you believe you are and your brain will filter reality to match. 2, the 48-hour rule. Act on insights within 4 hours or lose them. 3, protect your decision fatigue. Systemize so you're not relying on willpower. 4, minimum viable action. Lower the activation threshold to almost nothing. 5, emotion encodes. Connect your goals to genuine emotional charge. 6, design your environment, make good behaviors the path of least resistance. Finally, number 7, rest is when change happens. Prioritize rest, prioritize sleep. It's not about hustling harder. It's about working with your neural biology. And I truly believe, guys, that if you apply even 2 to 3 of these principles consistently, your 2026 will be so much different. Not because you'll suddenly have more motivation or discipline, but because you'll have set up the conditions for your brain to actually change. If this episode was valuable to you guys, please share it around. And if someone you know is struggling with goals, send it over to them. And if you want to go deeper on brain health, cognitive longevity, and protecting your brain as you age, that's what this whole channel is about. So make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care of your brain.